Congressional Budget Office today weighed in on the cost of Ryan Care, and Speaker Ryan has a lot to explain. The bill would lower federal deficits by $337 billion over the next 10 years, but 24 million Americans would lose their health insurance.
It's imploding, and 17 will be the worst year. And I said it once, I'll say it again, because Obama's gone. Things are going to be very bad this year for the people with Obamacare.
We'll take it up with former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, and healthcare expert Betsy McCoy. Also tonight, the Trump administration moving to counter the growing threat from North Korea. The Department of Defense today announced it's permanently stationing attack drones equipped with Hellfire missiles in South Korea. Would that be enough to stop North Korea's aggression? I'll have a few thoughts. And a major nor'easter threatening to shut down the Northeast. The East Coast tonight bracing for a blizzard and up to 2 feet of snow. Winter not yet over. Good evening, everybody. We finally know the cost of Ryan Care, and it is likely too high a price to suit President Trump. The Congressional Budget Office today releasing its long-awaited report on the House leadership's American Health Care Act, and the main findings: the bill would lower federal deficits by $337 billion over the next 10 years, largely as a result of cuts to Medicaid. Also, average premiums for single policyholders would be roughly 10% lower than Obamacare by 2026. However, around 24 million people would lose their health care coverage by 2026. Health and Human Services Secretary Tom Price saying that he disagrees with the CBO findings because it takes a narrow view of the bill.
The CBO looked at a portion of our plan, but not the entire plan. In fact, the entire plan includes the regulatory apparatus that we've got the ability to use at Health and Human Services that the previous administration used significantly, but we want to use it to make certain that patients are helped and that costs are decreased. They also ignored completely the other legislative activities that we'll be putting into place that will make certain that we have an insurance market that actually works.
And in a defensive and weak statement, Speaker Paul Ryan, in response, asked everyone to remember that this is just the first step of what is a three-pronged approach. And over the weekend, the Speaker warned about dire consequences if his colleagues don't approve his bill. Well, joining me now to talk about the CBO projections slammed by the Trump administration and whether the so-called Ryan Care bill can survive, the veteran of 10 presidential campaigns, Republican strategist Ed Rollins, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist for the New York Post, Michael Goodwin. Gentlemen, good to have you here. As a political document, because that's what this is, Michael, what is it? How would you characterize it?
Well, as you say, Ryan said that basically it's Armageddon if we don't act, but it may be Armageddon if they do act. And it's not just about the right, the supporters of the Republican Party rising up in anger. It is about how this bill will affect lots of people. By rushing it through, there will be plenty of time for the flaws to show themselves before the midterm elections. So this desire to get it done quickly seems to be more important than everything else.
And it is the leadership's desire to get things through quickly. Think about this, Ed. If they'd waited 1 week, two committees, Energy and Commerce and Ways and Means, could have had the CBO score in front of them.
Well, if you would have had the score in front of you, you would draft a different bill, which they could now have to go trying to do. And the first piece of strategy I would give him is for Paul Ryan to go back and be the Speaker of the House and quit being the author of this bill. The more that he's up there trying to explain it every day, he's very dull and boring, and it's he has a vested interest.
And he enjoys being dull and boring. It's clear as we watch it.
I think to a certain extent, he needs to play the Pelosi card. Pelosi, you never saw out front until the end. She put the votes together in the end. She created Obamacare, but she was never.
She behaved as a traditional
as a traditional speaker does. And I think his doing, we've now seen him do the dog and pony show.
Look, I don't know what his motivation is, but he is really asking the President of the United States to pay a very high price here with what is, I think, absolutely a slack performance on the part of a speaker, on the part of a person who professes to know something about health care.
And his own members are going to pay a heavy price unless they have to get this through. There's no question. They have to get this ball passed to the Senate. If it takes 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever, they have to get it. Otherwise,
when you say this, you're not saying this legislation in its current form.
I'm saying an Obamacare repeal and fix, and they ought to make sure it's as good as they can get it to the Senate.
Think about this, Michael. Dr. Tom Price, the head of Health and Human Services, is effectively the guiding spirit, if you will, the architect, at least at large here, on this legislation. And the best he can do today is say that the CBO is a flawed entity. I mean, this is really getting to be dangerous stuff, both as a political document and certainly as whatever actuarial effect it would have. It's not good.
Well, and also I think by the phases, the 3 phases, it seems to be all the good stuff comes later.
Isn't that the way of Washington?
Yeah, it's a little bit like Christmas here. So again, all this is apparently structured because of reconciliation requirements and everything. I understand that, but
I don't. I really don't.
Well, but it's being presented in a way that you'll just have to wait and see until it's fully implemented. I think that's a very hard ask for people who are already unhappy with the government programs.
All I heard was from a few Republicans, including the Speaker, goody goody. It saves $337 billion over a decade, as if that is sufficient reason, purpose, and design to put the president's signature on it. Well, I mean, it's crazy.
The whole argument that we've made about repealing this is we wanted to have a better health care system for those who are using the health care system. And they are going to get some choices now that they didn't get before, but equally as important.
Yeah, like to be one of 24 million people by 2026 who don't have health care.
Some of those are not going to buy into the system. And that's
my point being that this is a preposterous document to suggest that we have just saved $337 billion and taken 24 million people off Obamacare or Ryan Care. As if it's like a great bargain.
It's not the selling document that I would want to put my communication plan together. And equally as important, I think the White House staff, who has been very effective at pushing programs out, have got to get much more on the ball on selling these things that they're putting out there.
Well, they've got to decide. Is it going to be President Trump's bill, or is it going to be Paul Ryan's? Is Paul Ryan going? He's got to decide if he's going to be Speaker or President in waiting or whatever the hell he envisions himself as. Because right now, he's an ineffective tool, not at the disposal of the president nor the Republican Party or the majority in his own House of Representatives.
Well, it has to be the president's bill at the end of the day, and everything that he has coming forward is going to be very dependent on success. So he needs to pull it back, get it fixed, get Price involved in putting this thing together.
Well, Price better get to work.
Right.
I mean, because it looks to me like Dr. Tom Price and Speaker Paul Ryan, Michael, haven't been working very damn hard. Or at least very damn well.
Well, look, and I frankly don't think that Trump is going to immerse himself that much in the details. I think
I mean, he's the president. He's
going to make the final deal. But I think Price has to be his eyes and ears on this. I mean, Price has to, in effect, take it from Ryan.
It looks like the leadership of the House of Representatives, frankly, have been presiding over a process and not one. Paul Ryan, one of the most offensive images that has been put before the American people in this is Paul Ryan with a PowerPoint presentation with his sleeves rolled out. I guarantee it was the first time he rolled his damn sleeves up, because this bill doesn't betray a hell of a lot of wonkishness and effort. It's potentially a dagger to the heart of the Republican majority.
Could be.
By being first, it jeopardizes all the other reforms, taxes, and even immigration.
Yeah, then you have geniuses in the Senate saying that we're not going to get to tax reform until the summer, if there's a light breeze blowing. I mean, you don't know what the hell these people are thinking, but we're going to find out.
Thank you.
Ed Rollins, Michael Goodwin. Gentlemen, thank you very much. You guys should not get me this excited. We're coming right back with much more. Stay with us. Welcome back, and breaking news now. The Justice Department has requested more time in which to respond to a congressional committee about evidence that President Trump was wiretapped by President Obama last year. The House Intelligence Committee had set a deadline of sorts of end of business today. as they look into Russian interference in the election and this part of the investigation, and that is President Trump's allegations that he was wiretapped by President Obama. So an indefinite extension on the part of the Justice Department as they look for a little more time. And John McCain, Senator McCain, must be beside himself as he had demanded that there be some sort of presentation by today. He didn't have a similar demand, by the way, as to whether or not the Russians had interfered in the election or whether the Russians had any kind of relationship at all with the Trump administration. Of course, they did not, but he hasn't sought that deadline. President Trump making his case for RyanCare on social media. The president tweeted this: Obamacare is imploding. It is a disaster, and 2017 will be the worst year yet, by far. Republicans will come together and save the day. The president also tweeted this: if Obamacare is so great, why did they spend tens of millions of taxpayer dollars to hype it? Bad. The president linking to an article showing the Obama administration spent $77 million to not just hype, but to market Obamacare over the past year. $77 million.
Or,
can you
by
imagine?
the way,
joining me now and matching that voice with a face to discuss the Congressional Budget Office report on RyanCare, Betsy McCoy, senior fellow at the London Center for Policy Research and columnist for the New York Post, and you could not contain yourself.
That's right, because if it's so good, why do they have to force people to buy it? Why does there have to be a penalty?
And a mandate. And
That's
it's just
right.
a tax. We shouldn't say it that way. Chief Justice Roberts educated us better than that about what it is. Good to have you here.
Thank you.
That document politically is a suicide note, in my opinion, for
Yes.
the Republican majority in the House and for other Republicans, including the president, who have to deal with it now because of the inept talent that was put to bear on that.
But it has the seeds of success in it. In the CBO report, there are a couple of very interesting things. One is a special fund, I won't name the number, the section number, but a special fund in this that will substantially reduce premiums.
Yeah.
And what they should do is beef up that fund and eliminate the subsidies
You're already
entirely.
dealing with a document that we don't have.
That's
already
right.
dealing with a first of three stages or prongs.
No, I'm just saying when it gets to the Senate.
Three prongs, as Speaker Ryan said. This is, if the
bill has to
president
stand
were
on
to
its own.
take this up, you really believe that the majority could survive this?
Well, first of all,
I mean, let's be honest here,
Yes,
because
I
this
do.
audience expects honesty.
yes, and I'll tell you, first and foremost, this bill to repeal Obamacare is a jobs bill. The CBO doesn't say one word in its report, which you and I both read this afternoon, about the impact of this repeal on employment. But the fact is, employers faced with that expensive employer mandate pushed so many of their workers, demoted them to
Okay, I mean,
part-time status,
you could
declined to
conjure-
hire.
But this is the Congressional Budget Office.
That's
okay?
right.
It's not a conjuring act any more than
No.
whatever you take these
They
figures
only
for.
report what they're asked to report.
Why in the world would Ryan not have waited a week so he could address these things in committee, in Ways and Means, in Energy and Commerce? Why in the world would you not wait?
I agree.
Knowing what you would get.
I agree that they should have waited, and in addition,
So what do
they
they
should have
do now,
requested
Betsy?
the CBO
What do they do now?
to assess the impact of this bill on jobs.
Look, you've right now got a reality. You've got a president who needs this bill or an effective bill like it.
Yeah.
He needs tax reform. He needs an agenda. And right now, Ryan has hijacked the entire process and has done so with a loser piece of legislation like this.
We can't get to tax reform till
You
we
can't
pass
get to tax reform.
repeal of
you
Obamacare.
You could. You actually could.
But
This
they've
is the
scheduled
mantra.
it this way.
Yeah,
Unfortunately,
okay. So
I'd
what
like to see tax reform first, even
Well-
though I hate Obamacare.
Well, everybody hates it, but you know what
The
we're
fact
coming
is-
back to here, Betsy, is the President of the United States is exactly right. Let Obamacare take everybody to hell and be done with it and leave it as the
No,
Obama.
he's too good in America to
listen.
do that.
Oh, please, I'm just talking hypothetically
Okay.
here. You don't have to defend Donald Trump to me, all right? Secondly,
Yes.
let the Democratic Party figure out what they're going to do, because every delay should be, frankly, around the necks of the Democratic Party.
Absolutely.
And the Republican leadership in the House and the Senate aren't smart enough to play the game. Right now, we're looking at a mess.
Right, but I believe that the White House is going to take a stronger role now.
They have to. They have no choice.
Conservatives
they thought that they humored Paul Ryan and his acolytes, and he's delivered this nonsense.
They can deliver a really good bill that will not leave 14 million people uninsured, because it will reform Medicaid differently. It will eliminate the subsidies and instead pay the direct costs of very sick people in the individual market.
The president has said premiums will go down. The president has said the cost will be less.
That's right.
The president has said every American will be covered. This piece of junk won't accomplish a single thing that the president has promised the American people. And only Paul Ryan would have the effrontery, the arrogance, and the incompetence to put a bill like that in front of the president, in which he has to violate his promises on 3 levels.
But he is the art of the deal. He is the art of the deal, and I believe that he can take
He's got to overcome this kind of idiocy in the leadership of the House of Representatives and the Republican Party. I mean, come on.
The seeds of success are in this bill, in the section of this bill that pays directly for the costs of the sickest, allowing premiums to come down in the individual market for the healthy. He can offer the conservatives a beefed up stabilization fund and no subsidies, and they will sign on and ram this thing through both houses. I guarantee you that's the way to succeed. I hope they're listening, because we can make this work.
I hope Tom Price is listening.
Yes.
I really do. I hope that that Mick Mulvaney is listening, and I hope that Speaker Ryan is listening, because any more of his nonsense, it is going to cost the Republican Party dearly. If he still cares about the party. I don't know the answer to that question, obviously. Betsy McCoy, I do know this. You know your stuff, and it's always great to have your views.
Thank you.
Thanks so
Love
much.
being
Betsy
here.
McCoy. Be sure to vote in our poll tonight, and the question is, do you think Speaker Paul Ryan has vastly oversold the attractiveness of his ACHA legislation? Cast your vote on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. Follow me on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. Like me on Facebook. Follow me on Instagram at Lou Dobbs. Tonight, more than 60 million people on the nation's East Coast tonight are bracing for what is expected to be one of the most powerful nor'easters in 20 years. Forecasters saying the late season storm could slam some areas with as much as 2 feet of snow, winds as high as 60 miles an hour late tonight and tomorrow. Nearly 6,000 flights have already been canceled for the next few days. On Wall Street, stocks closing mixed. Investors looking to the Fed meeting, which kicks off tomorrow. That's always an exciting moment, isn't it? The Dow Jones Industrial is down 21 points. The S&P up a fraction, thank goodness. And the NASDAQ up 14. Volume on the big board, light trading, 3.1 billion shares. Crude oil falling for a 6th straight session, settling below $49 a barrel. And a reminder to listen to my reports 3 times a day, coast to coast, on the Salem Radio Network. I've just got to say how much fun it is to have Betsy McCoy on this show. She cares, she's passionate, and she is so deeply engaged in the subject. It's terrific. And that's why she's here quite often. A few thoughts now, if I may. As tensions are rising in Asia, rising, in fact, to a break point, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson will this week attend meetings in Japan and South Korea and China. Tillerson's meetings motivated by those rising tensions. North Korea is now preparing for a nuclear test after firing 4 ballistic missiles over the past week. And China, not constraining its client state, but rather seemingly supporting Kim Jong-un's irrational conduct and threats. China warning that the United States, quote, must pay the price for deployment of ground-to-air defenses in South Korea. The United States began the positioning of the THAAD missile defense system in South Korea last week, which has a 100% success rate, by the way, in interception of and destruction of ballistic missiles. The Trump administration also stepping up its response by deploying armed drones to South Korea, stationing Gray Eagle attack drones about 50 miles south of Seoul. And U.S. Special Forces, including SEAL Team 6, participating in joint military drills with South Korea. Beijing is also nearing the completion of its militarization of the artificial islands it built in the disputed waters of the South China Sea. Japan, as a result, sending its largest warship, the Izumo helicopter carrier, into the South China Sea, where the U.S. aircraft carrier Carl Vinson Strike Force is already on station. Beijing must wonder at the response of the Trump administration to these threats of its puppet ally, North Korea, and its own hardly concealed aggression. It was less than a year and a half ago that President Xi Jinping stood in the Rose Garden and figuratively patted then President Obama on the head and declared China didn't intend to pursue militarization. Xi would make a terrible mistake to believe the Trump administration is even remotely as passive or as foolish as the previous administration, or reluctant in any way to meet any challenge. Our quotation of the evening, this one from Thomas Jefferson, who said, quote, "Do you want to know who you are? Don't ask, act. Action will delineate and define you." We're coming right back. Stay with us. Unprecedented, dangerous, the deep state trying to subvert and sabotage the Trump presidency.
Very similar kind of pattern we're seeing, whether it's in leaking or it is in wiretapping or it is in a variety of other collusions between the deep state bureaucracy and the deep state media.
Former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich joins me here next. President Trump today holding his first cabinet meeting, but the meeting short of a full cabinet, with the president slamming Democrats for delaying confirmation of his nominees.
We have 4 empty seats, which is a terrible thing, because the Senate Democrats are continuing to obstruct the confirmation of our nominees for the Department of Labor, the Department of Agriculture, the Director of National Intelligence, and the United States Trade Representative, somebody I want very badly.
And our next guest says it's simple. The American people elect the president, and the president gets to have the people he wants in politically appointed offices. Joining us tonight, former Speaker of the House, 2012 presidential candidate, Newt Gingrich. Newt, great to have you here. Let me start with...
It's good to be with you.
It is simple, but Chuck Schumer is making it very complicated. Do you have a silver bullet that the president could employ here?
Look, I mean, I think Republicans and people who are concerned ought to say Schumer's adopting a strategy that says weaken America to strengthen the Democrats. And that's what he's doing. He's weakening America. He has deliberately, maliciously slowed everything down, making it harder for the elected president of the United States to take control of government. And the best case study is the Director of National Intelligence, who is, in fact, a former senator, Dan Coates from Indiana, a terrific guy. I suspect 90 of the senators in a secret ballot would confirm him. And to have him hanging out there is just maliciously destructive and makes no sense for the United States of America. And to the best of my knowledge, there's no issue that matters. I mean, this is just willful destructiveness, hoping that if they screw things up enough, that somehow the blame will come on Trump. And that's going to be a losing bet. The average American doesn't want to see a political party put its own interest above that of the United States.
Well, as you say, there is no question that Senator Schumer has done exactly that. And there is no strategy that could be employed by Mitch McConnell to accelerate the confirmation of those appointees.
Look, I think if the president wanted to go out and stump on this, he could. But I think he's gradually getting his team together. And frankly, he's doing so many different things, as you saw today, with this executive order, which is the most sweeping step towards cutting government that I can remember in my lifetime. I mean, every time I turn around, Donald Trump is doing something new and decisive as an entrepreneur, moving us towards a smaller, faster, more effective, less expensive government.
And today, the Congressional Budget Office producing its long-awaited report and delivering it, and immediately Speaker Ryan saying that, remember everybody, this is just the first of a three-pronged approach. We're looking at a report that is not helpful to either President Trump, to Paul Ryan, or his Republican majority in the House.
Look, one of my great disappointments with the Republicans in Congress has been their failure to abolish the Congressional Budget Office. I helped balance the budget for 4 years in a row, the only time in your lifetime it was done.
Right.
We fought the bureaucrats at the Congressional Budget Office every day. They brought in the architect of Obamacare to be their advisor when they scored Obamacare. Their score was wildly, I think, corrupt, dishonest, misleading, not defensible at all. And if you go back and look at the record, you'd say to yourself, any private sector institution that was this wrong would be fired. They'd be abolished. So I have no respect for the Congressional Budget Office. I think Republicans should be clear. This is a dishonest bureaucratic organization. It should be abolished. Save the money. Hire outside professional firms. Get 3 to 5 scores on major bills. And let's be honest about the fact that no group of bureaucrats can accurately tell you in a complex world what's going to happen over the next 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, I think that with the latter realization and acknowledgement, so much intellectually would be possible. By the way, the former speaker, referring to the years '98 through 2001 with a balanced budget, it is unlikely, improbable that we're going to see a partnership develop like the one between you and President Clinton. This is not a time in which that is likely to occur, and we have a plan.
No. I think just the opposite. Because you have Republicans in the House and Senate leadership. I think you are going to see a partnership. It won't be like it was with us when you had a Republican speaker and a Democratic president. But I think you're going to see, and I know this from talking with them constantly, you're going to see President Trump and his entire team working with Speaker Ryan, working with Leader McConnell on tax relief, on infrastructure development, on reforming government, on completing the job with health care.
No,
on
I was
rebuilding our
referring to
military.
a
I think this is going to be a
bipartisan
great team.
partnership as existed between a Democratic president and a Republican speaker or leader.
That ain't going to happen. That ain't going to happen.
And by the way, it's still an open question
Pelosi
what kind of partnership we've got between Mitch McConnell and the president, between the speaker and President Trump. This is how big a setback is this?
Look, McConnell's big test.
Go ahead.
McConnell's big test is the Supreme Court seat. I think he's going to get Gorsuch not approved. That is an enormous step towards rebalancing the Supreme Court.
All right. And now that we go to the matters of that very important tax reform legislation, the tax cuts, the very important Obamacare repeal and replacement legislation. Give us your outlook on the prospects for those two possibilities.
Well, I think you have to see the Obamacare process, the resetting our health system, as a minimum of 3 steps. Initial bill designed to get through the Senate with 52 votes. Follow-on bill coming much later, probably in the fall, that takes 60 votes. And in between, tremendous regulatory changes done by Dr. Price as Secretary of Health and Human Services. All of them are going to move us towards a more conservative, more free market, more decentralized, and less expensive system. I think none of it thrills me. I mean, this is a mess, but it's the kind of mess you get in a free society when you're trying to do something big. Right. Tax cuts and tax reform, I think, are coming. I think they're going to be very, very helpful to the economy. I'm very much in favor of the border transfer tax that Paul Ryan has put together. I think it'll give us a tremendous advantage in trade. I am tired of the Europeans and the Chinese and others having designed their tax code to help their exporters and hurt
I'd love to let you go over time, but not when you're espousing ideas that I am absolutely opposed to, like a border tax at this point. I'm kidding you. Well, I'm not kidding about being opposed to it. But the other part of that is there's a problem when you've got congressmen like Mark Meadows and Jim Jordan and senators like Rand Paul and Tom Cotton opposing this repeal and replace legislation that I don't think can be obviated quite so quickly. We got to run. I'd love to talk to you longer. Come back soon and we'll do so.
Good to be with you.
Great to have you.
We'll do it again.
You got it. Thanks. Britain moving closer to leaving the European Union. Another country weighing its own independence vote again. Former senior advisor to David Cameron, Steve Hilton, joins us here next. Stay with us. We'll be right back. President Trump releasing his first budget Thursday, one with historic cuts in the federal workforce. It includes potential 14% cuts to housing and urban development, a 25% cut to the EPA, 18% cut to commerce, and so it goes. $54 billion in domestic non-discretionary spending cuts to be used to pay for an equal increase in defense spending. Joining me now to discuss the president's budget, his health care, the latest on Brexit as well, Steve Hilton, former senior advisor to Prime Minister David Cameron, Fox News contributor. Great to have you with us. And Newt Gingrich earlier referred to just the wide open action and initiatives of the Trump White House right now, the Trump presidency. And it's really true, isn't it? I mean, we have never seen in this country a president attack on so many fronts the status quo.
That's right, and it's great news, and I think that this executive order on reforming government could be the biggest news of all in the long term. I haven't had a chance to really dig into the detail, but I think that one thing that's really important to bear in mind, I mean, you mentioned cuts. I'm all for cuts in government and cuts in spending, but actually we've had politicians on the right of politics for decades now saying government's too big, we're going to cut back government and so on. But nothing really seems to change. And you still get the bureaucracy and the spending and the bloat. It just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think the reason for that is that it's not actually enough just to cut and trim. What you've really got to do is have a radical rethink of the whole purpose of government and actually ask yourself some fundamental questions. Should the federal government be involved in this at all? Should this be a function that government is even doing? And if it is really necessary, then why should we be doing it at the federal level? Let's have a priority to put power and accountability in the hands of individual people as consumers, local communities for decision making, state government, and actually rethink the whole basis, not just cut a few percent here and there.
You know, it is staggering when one steps back a bit and thinks about it. We were handed the blueprint for decentralization of power and the protection of rights in the Constitution and our federalist system. This constitutional republic envisioned decentralization from its birth, and yet we wax and wane with those values sometimes in our perspective, and sometimes absolutely opposed when we see federal government grow ever larger. It's truly remarkable.
It is, and actually, funnily enough, Lou, you know, we talk about the EU and Brexit in a moment, and sometimes it actually reminds me of the Brexit debate in the EU. Now, the federal government in the US, at least it has the merit of being democratically accountable, unlike the EU, in the sense that the president and Congress are voted for by the people. But it's the same concept, really. Why should such a vast country with so many people and different priorities and different needs right across the country be governed from the center, just as in the case of the EU, all the different member states of the European Union? It's ridiculous to argue that they should all be run by a centralized bureaucracy in Brussels. It's actually pretty similar.
Center in terms of power, but not a center in terms of political spectrum. I think it's fair to note.
Right.
Let's turn, if we may, to Merkel, to the future of the EU, Brexit now, the vote today before the 31st of March, Section 50 will be triggered, and the exit in Brexit will take place. You've got to be thrilled.
Yes, and to be completely honest, it shouldn't really be a surprise. I think to a certain extent the last few months have been, I hesitate to say, a complete waste of time and energy, but it's pretty much that story, because from the moment the vote happened, it was very clear that the British people voted to get back their national sovereignty. their unique ability to control their own laws.
Well,
And
there
that
was also,
meant,
Steve, the matter of Theresa May required some education and rehabilitation in her opposition to Brexit. But the good news is it's underway. Steve, we're out of time. It's always great to have you here. Thanks for being with us. Look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks, Lee. See you soon.
Steve Hilton. Up next, Senator John McCain working as President Trump's chief antagonist. What is his goal? What is his deal? The Washington Examiner in New York joins me here. Stay with us. We're coming right back. Quickly, the results from our Friday night question. Do you believe the deep state and the left-wing national media fully intend to subvert the Trump presidency? 96% of you said yes, and so it is. Joining me now, chief political correspondent with the Washington Examiner and Fox News contributor Byron York. Great to have you with us, Byron.
Thank you, Lou.
Let's start with first the executive order on government that the president signed today. Your response to that at the same time as we're, 3 days away from his budget?
Well, he's finally actually kicking in some of the ideas he has about trying to reorganize the government, and the budget, which comes out and has probably already been declared dead on arrival, certainly will be declared when it comes out, is a statement of the president's priorities, what he wants to do, and I think with the Obamacare thing, with the budget, with plans for a tax cut, with his escalation of the fight against ISIS, you're kind of seeing the contours of this is the presidency that Donald Trump promised, and this is what he's trying to deliver.
And as he's doing that, he has across the way in the House of Representatives a speaker who just got a score from the CBO on his repeal and replace legislation, and it's not a pretty thing, Byron, is it?
No, and look, Republicans have criticized the CBO for a long time, and the CBO was wrong in its assessment of Obamacare. But the fact is, this is a terrible score. It's an absolutely terrible score in terms of the coverage of Americans, offering them health care. So, Obamacare sort of forced a product down some Americans' throats that they didn't want to buy. So a lot of them either didn't buy it, or the only ones who did buy it were the ones who were offered really substantial subsidies to do it. And in this case, they're not going to be required under the Republican plan. They're not going to be required to buy it. They're not going to buy it, and fewer people are going to be covered. But that's not really a good thing, as Ryan seems to be arguing.
Yeah, and reminding everyone defensively, this is just the first of a three-prong approach.
Can we talk about that? That's tough.
Yeah, that is tough, particularly when we've never seen the second and third prongs ever materialize as a positive and productive realities, have we?
And they're going to have, well, the thing about the second and third prong, this first one that's causing so much trouble is specifically designed to pass through the Senate with 51 votes under those so-called reconciliation rules. Part B and C, Part 2 and 3, are not going to be able to pass through the Senate on reconciliation, meaning the Democrats are going to filibuster, and it's going to require 60 votes. And Democrats so far are absolutely, totally united against it.
And by the way, Republicans in the Senate, Senator Rand Paul, Senator Tom Cotton, unfortunately the list goes on, Senator Mike Lee, and others saying, this is